Well, I think the first thing is to lean on the parliamentarians' expertise. They are someone who probably has some experience with dealing with these situations, so are able to suggest some procedural tools, help interpret the rules, to help maintain fairness, and provide some language for the moderator to use. I think the other thing to remember is to clarify the purpose of the dialogue as the moderator, to gently remind participants of the goal, whether it is to refine the language or to reach consensus or to prepare for a vote. Um, Also, I think the moderator and the parliamentarian together can help reframe and refocus the discussion, especially if things tend to go off track. So summarize what's being said, redirect a little, and say something like, we've heard several perspectives. Let's now focus on the specific wording of the amendment. Um, the other thing that I have found useful, especially in moderating such situations, is to continue to confer and communicate with the parliamentarian. And so um, that helps keep everyone centered and focused. So if the body would like to set a motion aside, there are several mechanisms to do that. The first is to table the motion, which is to temporarily set aside a motion because of urgent business that needs to be considered. So the motion is paused and it can often be taken up later, but it often isn't. Many people, however, use that same term table incorrectly. They use it to mean to kill a motion, but technically it's actually meant for urgent interruptions. I'll talk briefly about how you end a motion or kill a motion a little later. Some other options is to postpone to a certain time. So to postpone definitely. So that would mean delaying consideration of a motion to a specific time or a meeting. And the effect of that is to keep the motion alive and scheduled. And that usually happens when the body needs more time to discern, to reflect, or needs more information before deciding. You could also postpone indefinitely, which effectively kills the motion without voting directly on it. And as I said, the effect of that is to end consideration of a motion. And that usually happens when the body wants to avoid a direct yes or no vote on a motion. A final option is actually to refer the motion to a committee, to send the motion to a smaller group for further study, for revision, and that delays the action, but it keeps the motion active. And that allows the body to do more detailed work on a decision before the body as a whole can decide. And again, the moderator and the parliamentarian can work together to ask and guide the body in discerning which way they need to go. Essentially to say, I move to postpone the motion indefinitely. That would essentially take it completely out of consideration, and it would also prevent people voting directly on it. So what's required to make an amendment first is that a member of the body must formally propose an amendment. It can't just be discussed informally, or someone can't say, oh, I think we need to make a change. It needs to be formally proposed. After that, another member must second the amendment to show that at least two people support discussing it. And then the amendment is debated, just like the main motion, and voted on. If that passes, the main motion is modified accordingly and then debated and voted on as amended. Now, you asked about whether it needs to be in writing, whether it needs to be on the screen. Robert's Rules doesn't actually require written amendments. However, for clarity and transparency, there are some best practices that help things move along and keep things civil. If possible, I think it's useful to have it written on a screen, projected or shared via slides, so everyone can see the exact wording of what is being proposed. If technology isn't available, then paper copies always make sense, especially if the amendment is complex. And in a virtual meeting online on Zoom, it is always useful to have it typed into a shared document or in the chat. And usually what happens in large meetings, which make things flow efficiently, is to ask the member proposing the amendment to make sure it's written down and handed to either the moderator or the parliamentarian, if possible. I think one of the questions I'm asked quite often is, how can you be effective as a moderator, especially when you're dealing with some of these challenging issues in terms of how things function, especially around amendments and modifications of a resolution. And I think one of the things to understand is the role of the moderator is to maintain order and fairness, to guide decision making, and most importantly, to remain neutral, because the moderator does not debate or express opinions while presiding. So their role is to facilitate, not to influence. And to be as clear and as calm as possible, because the clear, calm language helps summarize complex points. It helps people stay centered, and it helps people to take a moment to step back and not get caught up in the emotion. It helps them to stay grounded in the primary purpose of what we are trying to do in whatever the business is. And it helps stay focused when discussions start to drift and move away from where it needs to be. And so I've used phrases like, let's return to the motion at hand, where we're here to decide whether to amend the motion, things like that. It also helps with maintaining the emotional temperature, keeping it relatively cool, and allows for moving forward efficiently and making the decision as efficient as possible. So I am currently the senior minister of Central Union Church in Honolulu, Hawaii, and have been here for about 2 years. I have been an ordained UCC pastor for 18 years, served in various areas of the country, from New England, the Midwest, and now Hawaii, and ministered in churches of various sizes and backgrounds, and from a new church start to a church like Central Union, which is a historic, large church. I'm not sure that I'd call myself an expert. I think a lot of what I've done has been learning as I have been doing the work of leading and guiding congregations and churches. And I think much of what I've done in terms of moderating meetings has come from that experience of working with people who don't necessarily have any background in leading a group of people, but have an understanding of what we are trying to achieve. And so that has helped.